many ways to die, so it's important when traveling through the Marvel multiverse to keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times, and try to avoid the bleakest alternate realities, zombies, and symbiotes at all costs. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. You wanted more, and we got you. It's me, Amanda, and today I'm back with another 10 worst ways to die in Marvel Comics. Which realities would you definitely avoid for your own safety while traversing the multiverse? I have many. There are many I would avoid. Number 10. Kingpin's Mutant Prison. Some of the worst fates really do come from ruins, where it feels like everything is just awful for the sake of being awful, I guess. I mean, this series was made to sort of contrast the Marvels, and it does that, admittedly, but it does that without really having anything else to say, it kind of feels like. When it comes to Quicksilver, he's seemingly still alive in this series, but honestly I can't imagine for much longer, which is how he's kind of making my list here. He ends up having his legs and arms removed because he's too fast, likely. However, Kingpin, his jailer, here claims that this is actually done for, and I quote, Quickie's own good. Considering that it looks like it wasn't done very well, and that it looks like Quicksilver may even still be bleeding, possibly bleeding out at this point, I can't imagine he'll last too much longer, and honestly, what a terrible way to go. Honestly, just existing in ruins I feel like is a pretty terrible way to go, because if you exist in that world, you're probably already dead, or you're like on your way to dying. I mean, even the protagonist, the narrator we follow on this journey, Phil Sheldon, is, so yeah. And he's like the protagonist, so. Or at least the narrator. I would say he's still the protagonist. He's still kind of the character we follow. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when we talk about pretty bleak things, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button. Number 9. Invisible Woman. Marvel Zombies really does have some of the most gruesome deaths, which is why I would never want to go there myself. This one at least was kind of going to a person that deserved it though, although I feel bad about saying that because I really do love this character, so like it's still sad that this happens in this reality. We are talking here about She-Hulk's death. I do love She-Hulk, although in this instance She-Hulk was already zombified and it kinda ate the kids of Susan Storm, aka Invisible Woman, and Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic in this universe, Valeria and Franklin. Weird thing is, you'd think Franklin would have been able to like fend her off with his reality warping powers, which I assumed he would also have in this universe, but hey, maybe on Earth 2149 Franklin didn't have powers, or you know, he was depowered prematurely. Either way, when Susan finds out that She-Hulk as a zombie has used her knowledge of the Baxter Building codes as someone who was once part of the Fantastic Four team to get in and then devour these two, she loses it and uses her power to create a force field and basically pop She-Hulk's head like a grape. It's insane to me how powerful Sue is. I mean, I guess at least it'd be quick, but yeah, Susan Storm's pretty wild. I would not want to be messed with by Susan Storm. Don't make her upset. Number 8. Driven Mad by Power. Another awful way to die, of course, coming to us from runes, is the fate of Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer dies as a result of what they believe to be a sort of superhero madness. In essence, it's believed that Silver Surfer missed the feeling of breathing air for some reason, being unable to as he was, traveling in the vacuum of space without, of course, needing to breathe. However, this was the very time when he decided, hey, you know what? I'd love to breathe right now, even though there's no air around me. Not a great time considering, yeah, there's no oxygen there, you're just floating around in the space between stars and planets. However, Silver Surfer is believed to have basically torn himself apart, clawing at himself until his lungs were exposed, and of course, despite having the power cosmic, he died. It's believed he died from the shock of the cold. I mean, honestly, what a way to go. Become so crazed that you think tearing yourself apart so you can breathe while flying alone in outer space on a silver surfboard is a good idea, or is simply something you must do. I can't imagine that. Also, I love how it's like, I gotta breathe, like time to rip myself apart. Okay then. Number 7. Squip, Grub, Chulp. What does that mean? You're about to find out. Symbiotes are definitely some of the most frightening creatures we have in the Marvel Universe. Definitely would not want to be rescued by one. Sorry, Venom. But also would never want to be dubbed a criminal by one. For years, Venom had been threatening to eat people's brains, and guess what? It also became more than a threat at one point. Venom threatened to do this because the symbiote actually feeds on the happy chemicals that brains produce, so either it needs a host with a good supply of that, or one one that basically snacks on chocolate a lot, which is why Eddie usually does that. Otherwise, it would literally have to find some brains to eat because it needs those chemicals, baby. Now, I'm pretty sure Venom has moved past this requirement in the modern day of comics right now, but it doesn't stop it from being a deeply disturbing thing that the symbiote did/needed to do to survive at one point. Also, for anyone who was wondering, the name of this point is the sounds that Venom made when, scarfing down some brains. So, ugh. Number 6, microwaved. This one makes me very uncomfortable, but I'm gonna tell you about it anyways because that's my job, so that's what I gotta do right now. Even though, of course, it's in a Deadpool story, which I think is the only place you could get away with something like this at Marvel Comics. In the comic Deadpool Kills Deadpool, we head to the multiverse where Deadpool, a version of Deadpool anyways, is hunting down, well, other Deadpools. Like the title says, Deadpool kills Deadpool. That's what's happening here. Right at the beginning of the series in issue number 1, the sinister black-suited Deadpool ends up confronting his alternate zombified self, Headpool, who is of course also known as Deadpool though, but we're gonna call him Headpool for clarity's sake. Headpool hails from the Marvel zombie universe of Earth 2149, where the world was ravaged by zombies. This zombie though ended up making his way to Earth 616 before he was reduced to just being a head. So how does the evil Deadpool deal with him? Pretty easily and terribly by popping him in a microwave. Splat! Number 5. Devoured by Spiders. What a way to go. I just love spooky, scary Spider-Man stories, and this one comes from another tale based in the Spider-Man multiverse. We are talking about the fate of Spiders-Man. Spiders-Man is like Spider-Man, but this Peter Parker, instead of becoming a man with spider-like powers, basically became spiders. Peter Parker in this case fell into a vat of experimental spiders who devoured him completely. However, because science, they also ended up taking on his consciousness, which survived his physical death, with the spiders becoming kinda like a new version of that character, the hero Spiders-Man, who is entirely made up of spiders, and who also kinda goes on to become a villain, but that's a story for another time. Now, I personally am not too bothered by spiders in my everyday life, but I also feel like I've never dealt with, a whole vat of hungry spiders who wanted to eat me. So on paper, this one remains pretty terrifying to me, even though I'm usually pretty cool with spiders. Number 4. The Meaty Revenge. On our part 1, we talked about the tragic and disrespectful death of Janet Van Dyne in the Ultimate Universe, aka the Wasp, but at least we can say she was avenged. Or we could say that if this avenging wasn't so terrible. I don't know if we can quite say that because it's pretty terrible what happens here. When Hank Pym, aka Giant Man, aka Ant-Man, finds out that not only is Janet dead, but that the Blob also desecrated her corpse by, eating her, he decides to get revenge by doing the same to Blob. But while he is still alive, because Ultimate Universe, Hank grows to his giant size and then picks Blob up and basically bites off his head. Although at least I guess he doesn't eat him, he instead, spits Blob's head out, but still the whole scene is not saved from being insanely awful, I'd say. And this is still not a way that I personally would want to go. Honestly, facing a giant being just seems like a bad way to go in general. I don't like that idea. I don't like things that are gigantic. It makes me uncomfortable. If you're not eaten, you're still likely getting squashed, and that's just a yikes to me. I don't want someone to step on me. That's no thank you. Number 3. Syncing with your best pal. Possibly one of the worst ways I can imagine going just in general. Whether we're talking about comic books or real life, this way is pretty bad. Even just based on the circumstances here, the way that Captain Kate Pride went is just really sad too. She went down with a ship, drowned, which many have said is actually one of the most painful ways to go. And what made her death even worse was that she believed one of her best friends, her pal Lockheed, also perished with her. This happened when Sebastian Shaw attempted to remove Kate from the Hellfire Trading Company, which she sat on the board of as their Red Queen, by, drowning her, killing her. Number 2. Starvation and Isolation. This one comes to us from Magneto, who saw this as a fair punishment to dole out to Red Skull, based on his treatment of other humans during World War II, when he was obviously allied with Germany in the Third Reich. Magneto in essence took Red Skull to an isolated underground bunker, leaving him trapped there without any way out as the door was locked and located on the roof of the bunker. Red Skull was left with no ladder and only some water to basically keep him company, which he'd have to ration in order to prolong his survival, although obviously I don't think Magneto really intended him to survive. During his time trapped here, he began to hallucinate and started to lose his mind as starvation set in. I think this is possibly one of the worst ways to go in general, so once again, Magneto takes one of our top spots. Basically, don't don't upset Magneto. Just don't do that. Number 1. Carnage. I'd like to thank Fireball Earth for this terrifying and very true suggestion, so thank you from the comments. This is such a good point. Carnage is so frightening. Carnage is definitely one of the worst ways to go in the Marvel Universe. With Carnage, you not only have to deal with having your life ended by a symbiote, which honestly, like I said, is terrifying enough, but you also have to deal with Cletus Cassidy, who is the other part of Carnage. Carnage is one entity made up of two: serial killer Cletus Cassidy and his soulmate, the alien symbiote offspring of Venom, who we often name Carnage, but technically Carnage is the entity of both of them together. Anyways, this symbiote is actually Venom's first child, who quickly became known as one of the most cruel and deadly out there, largely due to their connection to Cletus. I've seen what Carnage does when he has a whole town full of people to play with in Carnage USA, when the villain took control of an entire town, and it is definitely not pretty. Hands down, it's one of the most frightening Carnage stories I've ever read, so I would not want to be part of that at all. No thank you. That's all the time we have for this video. Watch out for supervillains, especially symbiotes, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and stay nerdy, YouTube.